It was a Friday morning, just a normal Friday morning. Nicola Bulley took her dog for a walk.
She's dropped her kids off at school. She's on a work call.
And then later that morning, her phone was found, her dog was running in the field, and she was gone.
She's literally vanished without a trace.
Police in Lancashire are carrying out a search operation for a woman who went missing 3 days ago.
The family says her 2 young daughters are desperate to have their mummy back home.
It was the story that gripped the nation.
People don't just vanish into thin air. Something happened that day. Something.
A total mystery.
Has she gone of her own choice? Has she been taken by someone?
Was she an alcoholic? Was there domestic violence?
Everybody's a suspect.
That reached the highest levels of government.
My thoughts are with Nicola's friends and family.
This is about hours, becoming days, becoming weeks.
It just seems completely inexplicable.
The police have never had anything like this before.
There were so many things going wrong.
This is not suspicious.
That is why this story grew so big.
It exploded on social media.
I don't understand how she can go missing.
He's lying through his teeth.
Clearly sabotaged.
You know, it's likes, comments, videos. It's just endless.
1 year on, there are questions still unanswered.
For Nicola.
I feel we've said as much as we can about that.
What do they mean? Now what are they holding back?
They were just desperately hoping that she was alive.
It's like a Columbo or a Midsummer Murder. But in reality, it was a woman's life that was at stake.
St Michael's-on-Wyre, Lancashire. A tiny village of just a few hundred people that is about to be in the eye of a media storm.
There isn't really anything there. You have a shop, a garage, the school, and the river. It's the kind of place where everybody does know everybody, and that sounds like a cliche, but it's true.
Just a quiet, kind of sleepy little place that doesn't trouble our news agenda very much. What happened was just incredible. I mean, we didn't see it coming.
St Michael's-on-Wyre is where Nicola Bulley's children go to school. Nicola lives a few miles away in the village of Inskip.
Nicola was 45 years old. She was born in Essex. She was a mortgage advisor. She moved up to Lancashire in the 1990s, and she lived with her partner, Paul Ansell. They had 2 daughters, aged 9 and 6.
Nikki Bulley seemed like someone who you'd want to be friends with. She just sounded like a decent, caring, fun woman who went for a walk that morning and vanished.
It's the morning of Friday, the 27th of January, 2023. And something odd has happened in St Michael's-on-Wyre.
Right from the very beginning, it had all the elements of mystery about it.
The first point at which anyone realizes something strange has happened is another dog walker finds a dog by the bench, harness on the floor, and the phone on the bench.
It was passers-by, people who were just in the field walking their dog, who realized something's happened here because the phone was on the bench and it was still connected to a work conference call. The dog apparently running between kind of the bench area and the gate.
You would assume someone has wandered off, something unusual has happened, but they've gone to deal with something, a problem, and they'll be back in a minute.
People don't just disappear into space. So where are they? What's happened?
This is an area where dog walkers bumping into each other morning after morning. They know each other's dogs. So someone came along who knew the dog.
One of the people recognised the dog and said, I think that belongs to Nicola Bulley. Her children go to this school.
And that led to the school being told, well, we found Nikki's dog. And at that point, her partner, Paul, was called.
Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell, is working from home. He's an engineer and is looking through emails when he receives a terrifying call.
The phone rang, and it was the receptionist at school. She said, Mr. Ansell, it's a bit of a weird one, but we've found Willow and Nicola's phone on the bench and the harness halfway down the embankment on the floor. I got hit by that weird, it's like your world just drops out because you know something's weird has happened.
Paul calls 999 and rushes to the scene.
I got in the car, drove down there, ran down the river to where the bench is. Somebody had Willow, and obviously there was a few other dog walkers there and stuff like that. Handed me Willow, handed me Nicky's phone. I still expected, obviously, to just have a look around and, well, there she is, or there she is. So I'm like walking off into the field that way, like looking around the corners, looking over the hedge, and nothing.
Officers meet Paul to assess what's happened. They launch a huge operation.
It became quite clear quite quickly that the police were taking this very seriously. It was all hands on deck.
There were divers in the water, there were drones in the air.
We had fire and rescue services, mountain rescue services.
They were doing fingertip type searches of the area. It was huge straight away. There was a lot of resources down there very quickly.
People go missing every day. The vast, vast majority don't get such a big policing response. You know, they tried their best to find her as quickly as possible.
And of course, at that point, there was no sign of Nicola at all.
An anxious Paul waits to see if she comes home.
You're thinking, at some point, she's just going to turn up. And, oh, I forgot to charge my phone last night. I'm really sorry. Missed your calls.
She got lost. She had something planned that she's not told any of us about.
As each hour goes past, I'm sure Paul begins to get more and more worried. And then the kids come home from school, and then, you know, like, where's Mum?
I still expected at any second, oh, well, we found her. We found her here, or whatever. And that, yeah, I mean, that never happened. Like, that was just the day then just, you know, just spiraled, and end of the day came and no answers.
She had literally vanished. With each passing day, this mystery grew and grew.
Days would turn to weeks and become the biggest story in the country, a mystery that gripped the nation.
Where is Nicola Bulley?
Police in Lancashire are carrying out a search operation for a woman who went missing 3 days ago while walking her dog.
Her dog was found nearby and her phone was on a bench, still connected to a work conference call.
I've been speaking to her friends who tell me that she has 2 young children, 2 daughters. They say this is extremely out of character for her.
If anybody knows anything, share with the police. 2 little girls want their mummy home. Please help.
Mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, disappeared after going on a routine dog walk. She's been missing for 3 days without trace, and it's now hitting national news.
The interest from our readership in what was happening to Nicola was huge. People were invested in Nicola.
People I've been talking to today saying that to them it just seems completely inexplicable.
Nikki Bulley was really relatable for a lot of people. It all felt really like something that could happen to you.
Everybody was desperately worried. Where was Nicola? Where is she? And everybody wanted to help.
There were posters of Nicola Bulley everywhere, like almost every lamppost you went past.
Local residents started very quickly to organise search parties.
It's like a Columbo or a Midsummer Murder, but in reality, it was a woman's life that was at stake.
With the eyes of the country on St. Michael's on wire, police are interviewing witnesses to try and work out what happened that fateful morning.
As part of the investigation, police would have retraced Nicola's last steps and her last sightings. She had a routine, and her routine was to drop the girls off at school and then to go and walk the dog.
It was totally normal. The girls were having a breakfast and everything was pretty much ready to go. You know, the routine is basically if Nikki's taking the girls and Willow, I'll get them in the car, get them strapped in, get Willow in the boot and all that, and Nikki comes out, give her the keys and off they go.
The Ring doorbell showed the children being put into the car and the car driving off. She drives to school. We don't know the route she took, but it most probably was the most direct route. She walked the short distance, crossing a road from the car park, and then there's a path that takes you right alongside the river. And at that point, she is away from any CCTV, and she's just gone on a normal morning walk.
The timings of that walk are crucial to the investigation.
At 8:59, Nicola sent a text to one of her friends to arrange a play date for her children. At 9:01, Nicola then joined a Microsoft Teams call on speakerphone with the camera and the microphone off, which was to do with her job as a mortgage advisor.
That was her routine. She would walk the dog, she would have the phone in her hand. She didn't need to speak in that meeting.
There was lots of people, 30, 40 people on this call, so she didn't have a reason to jump in.
When Nicola was out walking Willow that day, she was seen by people who knew her and recognised her.
The last positive sighting of Nicola on that morning is at 9:10 when a witness sees Nicola at a distance.
And then at 9:18, she adjusted the volume on her Teams call. And that's the last interaction that we know of. At 9:30, the Teams call ended. But at 9:33, her phone was still connected when it was found by a passerby. They were able to account for her up until 9:18, which is when she changed the volume on her phone. And then the phone was found at 9:33. So there is about a 10-minute window there, 15-minute window, that's unaccounted for.
It's horrendous because people don't just vanish into thin air. It's absolutely impossible. You cannot walk your dog down a river and just vanish into thin air. Something happened that day, something.
So what could have happened in those pivotal 15 minutes?
Your first process as any investigating officer is to form some kind of hypothesis. And ultimately, there's only three options here. She'd fallen into the water, she had gone off on her own free will, or there was a third party involved, a crime.
You have to have an open mind. You cannot go down any particular hypothesis, because if you do that, you will ignore vital pieces of evidence.
Police search the riverbank, and there are no obvious signs Nicola fell in.
It just didn't make any sense how you could go from being anywhere near that bench to then being in the river. There was nothing obvious for you to slip or trip on.
There's only one entranceway into the river, a small cutaway in the bank, and there were no footprints on that.
The dog is dry, hasn't been in the water. No item of clothing was there, nothing was seen in the water. There was not a trace.
Your natural human inquisitiveness screams at you, that doesn't make sense.
With no clear evidence Nicola's in the river, many are fearing the worst.
Perhaps she just walked off. Perhaps she thought, do you know what, I've just had enough.
Could it be something more suspicious?
Had she been taken or kidnapped, or had somebody done harm to her? Everybody is a suspect. You know, the family, partners, even members of the public, or witnesses.
Detectives meet with Paul to secure a detailed account of Nicola's life and background, but also his whereabouts that day.
In order to commit a crime, you have to have access and opportunity. What we know about missing people and overwhelmingly murders and attacks is it's somebody known to the person.
60% of murdered women are killed by current or former partners. If something sinister has happened to Nicola, Paul is an obvious suspect. He was one of the last people to see her that day.
He was a person of interest, as were a number of other individuals linked to Nicola Bulley, because they had the knowledge, they had the access to her.
Paul tells officers he was at home at the time. This is corroborated by CCTV footage, showing him leaving the house when the alarm was raised.
In order to commit the crime in person, he had to have been there. And he wasn't, he was at home. But even if he'd used a third party to commit the crime, there still would have been a level of communication. And in those early days, they worked really hard to look at his phone, his computer. Of course, he remains a person of interest, but he was never a suspect.
But that doesn't rule out another third party. The idea that someone may have taken Nicola starts to gain traction in St. Michael's.
It completely changed this sleepy little village into a state of fear. One local resident said that she and her friends were not taking their dogs down, they were sending their husbands down instead. If there was somebody out on the loose abducting women, then they needed to be saved.
With so few leads, police turn to the public for help.
So the public are the eyes and the ears of the police, and so they use the media as a conduit to get that information out.
We appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St. Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us.
Police are looking for any evidence of suspicious activity in the area that day.
They focused very early on these motorists driving through St. Michael's back and forth and who might have seen something.
It is on quite a busy road, so there's a lot of passing traffic, which was another theory. Someone from outside has passed through.
They are collecting as much information as possible, witnesses, CCTV. It takes them hours and hours to view that stuff, because of course you have to go through it, frame by frame.
And police find an image of one person who could hold the key.
Police said that they were trying to find a key witness wearing a red coat. Everybody, all of a sudden, was desperate to try and find this person. Could this be the person that could tell us what happened to Nicola?
Friends and family of Nicola Bulley have renewed appeals to help find the mother of two a week after she went missing.
Nicola went for a walk with her dog, Willow, and she hasn't been seen since.
A week in, and searches are continuing up and down the river for Nicola Bulley. The mystery is now captivating the world.
It was being reported in newspapers across the country and then across the world, including places like the New York Times. The New York Times are reporting a story about a missing woman in St. Michael's. It just seemed bonkers.
The amount of attention that it was getting was on a scale that I haven't really seen. There are murders that get a lot less attention than the disappearance of Nicola Bulley.
It had all the ingredients of a mystery. It had the dog on its own. It had the phone just sitting on the bench. And then the police hunted for a woman who'd seen in a red coat.
Police want to speak to a woman who could hold the key.
With no evidence found, Lancashire police are tonight appealing for a potential witness to come forward.
They'd obviously been checking through the various CCTV cameras and found her on there.
Did she see what happened to Nicola that day? She comes forward and speaks to the police and the press.
When we actually spoke to that lady, it turned out that she'd spoken to the police on the first day and that she'd told them she didn't know anything. She was baffled as to why she was at the centre of this new appeal. There was a little bit of a lack of communication between certain arms of the police force. It did feel a little bit unorganised at times.
The police are increasingly under the microscope.
The more time that passed that Nicola was not found, of course, the criticism started to build up.
Well, the family weren't assigned family liaison person. That didn't happen anywhere near fast enough. They've ended up with a family friend being their media advisor rather than somebody from the police.
I found it really odd that we could go to the bench, that we could get right into the scene.
Well, this is the spot where Nicola's dog was found, and her phone was discovered lying on this bench.
Lancashire police did not preserve the scene. They did not preserve the area around the bench. Once you lose that crime scene, you cannot get that evidence back.
The police explained that by saying by the time they arrived on the scene, enough people had been through that it meant that there was no point putting up a police cordon.
So there were so many things going wrong, but no one could foretell just how big this story was to be and the twist it was to take.
Police are under fire and are no closer to finding Nicola. But they are ready to give their theory on what happened.
A week after Nikki had disappeared,
good afternoon and thank you for coming.
There was a police press conference in the village hall.
We've only a 10-minute window in which we cannot account for Nicola's movements. The inquiry team has undertaken a number, as I said, of dashcam, CCTV and ring doorbell footages. This has allowed us to eliminate any trace so far of Nicola having left the riverside. Our main working hypothesis, therefore, is that Nicola has sadly fallen into the river, that there is no third party or criminal involvement, and that this is not suspicious.
And that obviously prompted a lot of questions from all of the journalists who were there about, how you've landed with this working hypothesis.
Can you just explain to me why you're so sure she didn't leave the riverside? Are there no kind of cross-country routes, no other ways out at all that could have been taken?
Yes, several of the exits from the riverside area are either locked or they're covered by CCTV. So we've been able to look at that CCTV, negate
Nicola leaving the local area. The areas that are not covered by CCTV is where we've been particularly interested in dashcam footage.
There are gaps in the police's knowledge, a 10-minute window unaccounted for, and routes not covered by cameras. Surely Nicola could have masterminded her own disappearance or been taken by someone. Journalists and the public are skeptical about the police's theory.
They were really focused on just the one hypothesis, which is she went in the water. The dog hadn't gone in. There's no disturbance to the riverbank. And I went to the scene and I looked, and there's quite a number of exit routes.
We felt as journalists we weren't seeing enough or being told enough, and I think the family felt the same. There have been cases in the past where the police have said that they think it's one thing, and actually it has turned out that foul play has been involved.
Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry, two sisters who were reported missing in London. And that missing report wasn't taken seriously, it wasn't acted upon. It was assumed that they'd just gone off somewhere, where actually they had been killed.
Doubts over the police's handling of the case are growing, and they are about to add fuel to the fire.
I mean, there was another question at that press conference about whether there were any kind of health issues, any health problems.
Are there any matters in relation to Nicola that we should be aware about that would cause her to go missing? And the answer was no.
The factors, was she ill or was she taking any medication or underlying condition?
We're not considering, we've clearly considered the whole picture, but that is not relevant at this time, no, not at all.
The problem with that is, of course, it potentially rules out suicide, which led you to think there must be more to this than what they're telling us.
So there's nothing in Nicola's background to suggest she took her own life. And the river doesn't look dangerous enough for it to be an accident. So how can they be so sure she's in the river? And why haven't they found her? Many think the police have got it wrong.
There was an information vacuum, and that started to be filled.
Social media became like wildfire for the content, particularly on TikTok.
I don't understand how she can go missing. It doesn't add up.
It was trending very quickly. It was all I could see in my feed.
People became obsessed. Everybody wanted to be the person that might solve this mystery.
Breaking news in the case of Nicola Bulley.
Authorities are continuing an extensive search of the river.
There was people at home doing their own take on what had been in the news. They were filling in the gaps in information that they felt the police might know or hasn't said.
Some speculate that she went into the river to retrieve the dog's ball. Yet when the dog was found, it was completely dry and the ball is nowhere to be found.
Conspiracy theories start to swirl. The idea that she was kidnapped, the idea she ran off with a lover.
There's only two possibilities. She's either eloped with somebody or she's been abducted.
There were suggestions that Nicola had been dragged into a series of underground tunnels.
CCTV blind spot that the police haven't bothered to look into.
That leash was meant to be there, and so was that phone. It was a setup.
They were making highly litigious claims against Nicola's partner, Paul Ansell.
Can you not see through him? He's lying through his teeth.
What doesn't sit right with me, with this gentleman, is his body language.
There were people saying, Paul looks too calm and relaxed. Paul hasn't cried.
His face is some confusion as the sides of his mouth go up and his brow goes down.
None of us would behave in the way that we think we would. We'd all cry too much or cry not enough. Because what is the appropriate amount to cry?
It's also ridiculous, his hat and his scarf. England is not particularly cold, so that makes you wonder what he's trying to hide.
There was 400 million TikTok views. There was 160 million Instagram Reels views. It was likes, comments, videos. It was just endless.
Lancashire police lost control of the narrative. But in reality, and in fairness to them, they were focused on finding Nicola.
With the police no closer to the answers, the family turned to a private diving expert.
To add to what was effectively developing into a circus, suddenly you bring in a guy called Peter Faulding.
I've worked with Peter for many, many years. He ended up speaking to the family, and the family were desperate. And Peter, in the very way that he is, which is a very accommodating and caring individual, said, look, I'll bring my team up for free to help you.
You know, he's a very experienced diver. He's worked on several cases of missing people and got results.
He made some pretty bold promises about what he could do with his equipment. If she was in the river, he would find her.
Peter Faulding starts giving regular updates to the media.
We've got a really specialist bit of kit, high-frequency side-scan sonar, which we've got a very high hit rate.
The police were in a difficult position. If they didn't use him, the public would say, well, why aren't you using a resource?
A private search team who's joined the rescue effort today said it could take up to 3 days to conduct a thorough search of the River Wire.
Peter Faulding was engaging with the media. He was happy to speak, and he became an unofficial spokesman for how the investigation was running.
They've got the police underwater search team, they've got the search officers, there's Coast Guard working down there as it goes out into the estuary.
There were no police press officers, there were no police officers who were part of those briefings.
He was utterly convinced that her body was not in the river.
I personally don't think she's in the river. That's just my gut instinct at this point. I said that if Nicola's here, I'll find her. If Nicola was in that river, I would have found her.
He declared that she wasn't in the river. So that was like, well, where is she then? She must be somewhere else. Something's happened.
You have this man who's fairly loquacious. He's ready to give his theories in a fashion that the police won't. And what is that going to do? It's just going to make the story even bigger.
Peter Faulding's comments spread across social media. Some are now taking matters into their own hands.
Because of the extraordinary global interest, and obviously the traffic that these amateur sleuths were getting, that some decided actually to go to the area.
If you turned up in St Michael's on Wire and started filming stuff, you were guaranteed huge amounts of clicks online.
The bench became a tourist attraction.
Some people will think it's weird coming here.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
It is a bit eerie. It does feel a bit weird.
But the fact that you've chosen to come here...
Because I just didn't want to take other people's words for it, you know what I mean? I've been watching so much online on YouTube videos.
They clearly sabotaged Peter Faulding's search when he came up and volunteered his own time and everything else.
I could not believe my eyes when I saw people actually turning up. I have never seen the like before, and I hope to never see the like again.
There was a guy who was live streaming, claiming that he was trying to contact another world and claiming he was in contact with Nikki.
There was a property on the other side of the river from the bench, which was partly derelict. People trespassed, filming, conducting their own search. They wrongly believed that the police hadn't been in there. Well, the police had been in there more than once.
Doors being banged in the middle of the night, people being confronted outside their homes.
Do you have anything to say about Nicola Bulley? Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Okay.
They were under siege.
The police had never had anything like this before. They'd never dealt with a situation like this.
They just didn't seem to realise how huge this had become.
Days would go by without us hearing from the police on camera. They dropped the ball right at the beginning and just then couldn't get it back.
A lot of people there knew Nikki. So they were dealing with all of these people turning up in their village, while also really worried about what had happened, about where Nikki was.
The invasion of amateur sleuths in St. Michael's-on-Wye would cause police to take drastic action.
This had been now going on for many, many days and weeks. The family was still sat with no answers, but of course that soon was to change.
It's almost 2 weeks since Nicola Bulley vanished without trace. The desperate search has extended to the River Wyre's estuary in Morecambe Bay.
They have shifted the focus of that river search away from the village itself, with the Lancashire police saying today the focus now moves into the area of river which becomes tidal and then out towards the sea.
But police are also tackling an invasion of amateur sleuths.
We're on live stream. Don't ever go to put your hand on me again. Are you here?
Officers are forced to take action.
Police have been given extra powers in the Lancashire village where Nicola Bulley disappeared over concerns about videos posted on social media.
The police issued a 48-hour dispersal order, which was going to give them the power to break up groups of clairvoyants, online sleuths.
The TikTokers were basically banned. It's tricky because what's the difference between a TikToker and a journalist? There is a difference. Generally, we aim to be reporting based upon facts. We weren't making stuff up. We weren't accusing people of things.
I mean, I really felt for Nicola's family because they were having to deal with all of this external input from social media. And in particular, a lot of people were casting doubt on Paul.
Two weeks in, Paul gives an interview for a special programme on Channel 5.
Paul, thank you so much for talking to us. I interviewed Nicola Bulley's partner, Paul Ansell. The world exclusive. What that interview offered was a snapshot of a broken family in the middle of a story which was everywhere. How are you doing? What's life been like?
Hell. My main focus is the children, always has been. It just doesn't feel real at all. Like, it's the only way I can explain it. I honestly believe I'm going to wake up at any moment.
You said that your main priority was the girls. Can I ask you how they're doing?
All you want to do is make everything better for your children, isn't it? You know, whenever they're worried or they're scared or anything like that, you want to make it better for them. And I can't do that.
Here was a man whose life was in tatters. You know, you've got police in your house, and you've got the media outside your house. And then on social media, people are pointing the finger at you. And he addressed that directly. You know, people watching him thinking, you've done it, you've killed your partner.
I read one that said the police need to look at the partner. And I'm sort of like, well, yeah, that's the first thing that they do.
I suppose you expect that, don't you? Yeah.
I expected that. I said to them, do it and get that out of the way and then focus on
finding her.
On finding her. Personally, I'm 100% convinced it's not the river. That's my opinion. Nikki would never give up on us, ever. She wouldn't give up on anybody. And we're not going to ever give up on her. Like, we're going to find her.
Your partner's vanished and you just don't know the answers. And of course, it's also being played out into the public domain. Nicola Bulley's life was about to be pulled apart.
"5 days pass without hearing from the police. Paul's interview has failed to stop the accusations swirling online.
I didn't feel that there'd been enough on-camera presence by the police. We hadn't heard from the senior investigating officer, and suddenly here we were, no longer in the village, but at police headquarters with a high-profile media briefing.
Police try to give more information to stop the rumours about Paul, but no one could anticipate the catastrophic blunder they would make.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk.
They hold a press conference and they say that Nicola has certain vulnerabilities, but they decide not to go into any more detail. Well, that is the worst thing you could possibly do to a pack of journalists.
Of course, this led to massive speculation again on social media. What does this mean? Is this something that's happened within her personal life that has made her high risk?
You could see things on social media straight away. What do they mean? Now what are they holding back?
Can you just give us a bit more information about her vulnerabilities?
I'm not going to go into the details of those individual vulnerabilities. I've asked you to respect the family.
Was that drink? Was she an alcoholic? Was there domestic violence?
I've had 3 text messages in the past 5 minutes asking what they are and what that's about. So if we want to sort of dial down speculation, it might make sense to make that clear.
I feel we've said as much as we can about that. It is personal, private information.
There's no let-up online. The police issue a clarification.
This bombshell email comes out. I remember reading it and just thinking, wow.
Nicola had in the past suffered with some significant issues with alcohol, which were brought on by her ongoing struggles with the menopause, and these struggles had resurfaced over recent months.
I was absolutely astonished. I think me and every other middle-aged woman in the country and the world was thinking, what on earth? Why would you possibly release that information?
I've never come across a case where a woman's menopausal state has been mentioned or discussed as part of an investigation. It didn't further the investigation. It would have been fine to have just said that she had medical issues.
And of all the fury that there was on my show on LBC at that time, that annoyed people the most.
I just don't see how releasing that piece of information is going to help find her.
No.
The country is reeling. The criticism comes from the highest levels of government.
I was concerned that that private information was put into the public domain, and I'm pleased that the police are looking at how that happened in the investigation. Obviously, my thoughts are with Nicola's friends and family.
There was some logic behind it, that they were protecting Nicola's partner. They wanted to shore up their theory that Nicola was actually, probably in the river.
If they thought that that was going to help take these ridiculous rumours away from Paul, they were very much mistaken.
How did it get to this point? At the start of the investigation, the police thought Nicola may have taken her own life.
They deemed there was something that was going to cause her to take her own life or impact on other people, and that's why it got classified as a high risk.
That was why the response on the first day was so big. But the police didn't explain that to the media.
They could have told us this information off the record, and it would have completely changed how the media dealt with the story. It made more sense why they were worried that Nicola had gone into the river. If somebody is struggling with their mental health, then, things can happen.
If they had only said to Paul, we are going to let media know this is a high-risk missing person. If we're asked questions, it's in relation to her mental health. That would have stopped everything. The media certainly would have respected that and gone, OK, there's obviously some issues there. It wasn't a story.
At one of the early press conferences, police were asked, is there anything going on in Nicola's life that might explain this? And the answer was no.
Was she ill, or was she taking any medication or underlying condition?
We're not considering, we've clearly considered the whole picture, but that is not relevant at this time.
The answer should have been yes, but we'll tell you about it off camera.
But because they failed to be very clear from the outset, and they allowed incorrect narratives to remain and also a void to exist, the story took on its own life. We were left walking away with a press conference, Nicola's reputation damaged hugely by what the police had said, but it would only be a few days later before we found out what happened to Nicola Bulley.
3.5 weeks after Nicola Bulley went missing, everything changed.
We found out, I think, around lunchtime that something was happening at the banks of the River Wyre. It was actually a mile or two down the river.
Detectives searching for missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, have found a body in the River Wyre, about a mile from where she was last seen. The discovery came after a sighting by 2 members of the public.
There's just this sense of sadness. It was a really sad day. After everything that had happened, everybody felt it. At that point, it became just a real family tragedy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sadly, we are now able to confirm that yesterday we recovered Nicola Bulley from the River Wyre.
Nicola's family have asked that we release the following statement. We will never forget Nikki. How could we? She was the centre of our world. She was the one who made our lives so special, and nothing will cast a shadow over that.
It was a really, really tragic ending to, you know, weeks and weeks of the nation holding out hope.
I can't imagine what that day was like and how you tell your children that. I just wish there was a different ending to the whole thing.
Why did it take so long for Nicola's body to be found?
We'd had not only Peter Faulding investigating the river, but also other police divers. So to suddenly realise that she'd been there all the time was sort of mind-boggling, really.
Police tried to provide answers. One of their divers films himself in the River Wyre to illustrate how quickly a body can move.
It's pushing me downstream towards the weir.
Although it seems like a long time to have a body in the water for 24 days, that's not actually uncommon. Bodies can sink, they can be pushed out, and then as the tide and the water moves, they can be brought back.
They even pretty accurately predicted the weekend at which they thought the tidal conditions would be right and they would find the body.
But so many questions remain. How did Nicola end up in the water? Was there foul play? And what new evidence is there about what happened that day? Nicola Bulley's body was discovered in the River Wyre 3 weeks after she disappeared. 4 months later, an inquest was opened to establish the cause of her death.
They were thorough. They went through a lot of evidence. They went through much more evidence than most inquests do.
One of the key features was that she was wearing a Fitbit, a fitness watch.
There was data on that watch which helped to identify what happened in those final few moments.
9:18 was the last contact she had with her phone. Then we have 9:33, which is when the phone is recovered.
At 9:22, the Fitbit records a huge spike in Nicola's heart rate, which is commonly associated with cold water shock.
The information showed that her heart rate spiked, and that's the point that they felt that she hit the cold water.
She had very, very little hope of being able to get out of that water. It was so cold. There would have been a kind of a gasp reaction when she went in.
And I've seen that myself in the Thames, where even the best swimmers cannot swim because of that initial shock.
The coroner thinks probably within 30 seconds she would have been unconscious.
The inquest ruled that Nicola's death was an accident, not suicide.
She'd been texting a friend, organising a play date for her children.
She loved her dog Willow. She would not just have left her dog there. There was no alcohol in her blood.
At that point in time, things were good. She was upbeat. There were reasons why the police considered her vulnerable, but the only evidence pointed towards it being an accident.
There was no evidence that the coroner believed fitted a third party, and in fact directly asked the senior investigating officer if there was a third party involved, and they said no.
But how Nicola entered the water remains a mystery.
Did she trip? Did she fall? Did she suffer dizziness? No one was close enough to her at the point at which she went in the river to see or hear it. The coroner was quite clear, we'll never know. And that's desperately sad for the family.
After the brutal criticism of Lancashire police, the College of Policing conducted a review.
We found the police investigation and search to have been well conducted by Lancashire Constabulary.
Ultimately, they were right. They said right at the beginning that they thought that Nicola had gone into the river.
But there are some critical, very, very basic elementary errors.
Their biggest criticism was the release of information that Nicola was struggling with the menopause.
We are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
But they also criticised the involvement of Peter Faulding.
Peter Faulding became a hindrance rather than a help. He told the family that Nicola was not in the water. He also told the family at one point that he had found the body, and that actually turned out to be some branches underwater of a tree.
They concluded that the relationship between the media and the police needs to be rebuilt for something like this not to happen again.
A few weeks later, one of the leading officers in the case, Peter Lawson, passed away of natural causes, aged 50. But disturbing false conspiracy continues to swirl online, suggesting that this sad and unrelated death is somehow linked to Nicola Bulley.
It's almost like the more outlandish, the more ridiculous, the more clicks it seems to get.
Social media, they have to learn from this. But will they? No, because it helps fuel it and keeps the money pouring in.
People's fascination with true crime is unabated. And of course, people's instinct with this particular case was to think there was a criminal act here.
But of course, this was a real person, a real family, going through a very, very difficult time. And ultimately, the ending turned out to be very, very ordinary indeed. It was just a terrible, terrible accident.
She is fun, she is loving, and she is an exceptional mum, and she absolutely, you know, adores our girls.
I have stayed in contact with Paul and the family, and it would be wrong for me to say they're doing okay, because how can you be okay? Family are trying their best in impossible circumstances to live one day at a time. And the kids are surviving in a world without their mum, which must be heartbreakingly difficult to deal with every day.
She is a pillar of strength, you know, to our family, and without her, you know, the hole is, bigger than you could possibly imagine.